Gyms are open again. That's huge. No more kitchen workouts. I'm gonna hit a workout here now. In the meantime, I actually just did a talk at a Digital Marketing Masterclass at my alma mater at Algonquin, an online class. Talked to, I think it was like 5 students, but talked about content creation and storytelling for about half an hour with a group of students. So I'm gonna play some of those clips here now while I get this workout in. Just give everyone a couple more minutes before we start here. I think it's just you and I right now, Justin. Hopefully we'll get a couple more people in the room before things start here. All right, guys, this might be it. So we'll just get going here. So as you would have heard in my intro there, my name is Jacob Kelly. I spent a couple years here at Algonquin. I did 2 years, like I said, in the business marketing program. I graduated from that. I was originally supposed to take a postgraduate, elected to drop out of my postgraduate to just start working. I was working an internship part-time on the side at the time, and then when I made the decision to go full-time into marketing, I reached out to my program coordinator, and he introduced me to the Auto Sports Entertainment Group, and I got an interview there. From there, like I said in the intro, I started working with the 67s, and the big thing with the 67s was trying to reestablish the team's brand in the city, and my philosophy when doing that was to do so through storytelling content on social media. And my thought process was to provide as much access as humanly possible to our fans to better tell the story of the team. And so it was a 2-year process, and it really kind of culminated at the end of the 2 years when the team is doing well, so there's no better marketing plan in sports than a winning team. That is always the best help you can get. But we had a really good team. We were going into playoffs, and then I was able to travel with the team through all 4 rounds of the playoffs, really doing intimate behind the scenes content in the locker room, at the hotel. Even one thing that got picked up by CBC and that led to me having an interview with CBC was literally just the fact that I was taking photos of meals before that the team was having at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I did a thread on Twitter with the meals, and CBC wanted to talk about that because they'd never seen that before. Just such an intimate look at what it was like being on the road with this team. So storytelling with content has always been a philosophy of mine, something I've followed since the beginning of my career. Granted, it was just a few years ago, but so through the storytelling content, we had awesome success with that. I think our Instagram almost doubled in 9 months. All collectively across social media, just through our content, we had an earned media value. So if you were to attribute how many impressions, how many people we reached, how much engagement we got organically, if we were to have paid for it, would have cost us, I believe it was $1.4 million. So our earned media value was really high for that, all through storytelling content. And then from there, after the 67 season, I flipped over, like I said, to the Red Blacks. And with the Red Blacks, it was a little bit different from the 67s because, like I said, a good marketing strategy with a sports team is a winning team. And the Red Blacks were not winning last year when I was running their social media. I believe they won 3 out of 18 games. So we had a bit of a different approach with it in terms of our content. We tried to keep things a little bit lighter. We didn't want to focus too much on the games and the outcome of the games because we kind of went into damage control and just wanted to make sure we maintained a good relationship with our fans because they weren't happy with us at that time. So we ended up switching to more of like I said, more just feel-good content. We had, luckily enough, we partnered with the Canadian Guide Dogs for the Blind. So we had puppies in our content quite often. So it's a bit of a different approach from the 67s. I'm still trying to tell positive, upbeat stories as it pertained to the Red Blacks. On top of that, I also host a podcast. I didn't actually say this in the intro, but I host a podcast, My Social Life. It's actually all about telling the stories behind the people on social media. So it originally started as me trying to learn tips and tactics for social media, but I quickly realized after doing the first couple episodes that people were actually resonating with the stories in the podcast more so than the actual tactics. So I flipped the whole podcast on its head and just focused on the story of each individual guest because that's what people liked. And people can just connect with stories better because with a story, you can kind of see yourself in that other person's shoes, and you can view them more as a person, not somebody, whether it be with the 67 showcasing them behind the scenes, they're not just athletes, they're also people. With the guests on my podcast, I've interviewed like massive YouTubers with like 4 million subscribers, but people learn that they're not just YouTubers, are actually people. So people resonate with stories really, really well, and that's why it's always been kind of a philosophy of mine to include storytelling in the content that I do. Today, I can send a link to the podcast for sure. And then today with my agency, so my agency is Jack Marketing. Like I said, I service clients across North America, both Canada and US, and in parts of Europe. And the big thing with all of my clients is I never promise growth with what I do. I'm not a growth hacker by any means. I just focus on creating compelling content for the existing fans and followers of the different companies that I work with. I work with different startups. I work with different agencies as well. They bring me in as a specialist, and I work with someone on their personal brand. And a lot of it is just creating compelling content. And I kind of wanted to dive in before. I was going to open it up to questions after this as well. We can kind of all turn our mics on if you'd like to. But I have some thoughts, personal thoughts here around content creation, kind of some of my thoughts as it comes to creating content and compelling content and telling your story. So I'll kind of run through those, and then any questions or anything that you have, like, please feel free to ask them. So the first one is document, don't create. And if anyone follows Gary Vaynerchuk, that's something he's actually big on as well. And what that means is when it comes to creating content, a lot of people want to come up with what can they film, what can they make, what can they take photos of. And kind of my philosophy when it comes to creating content is I just like to document what's going on. So with the 67s, a lot of it was just what are they doing? Let me film that, let me take photos of that. And it was just, it's so much easier to document what's happening because you don't have to think about creating the content. You're just recording what's happening around you. And the best part about documenting, even when it comes to, for like personally, like I do a vlog just for myself, I put it on YouTube, it has like 5 viewers. But the reason I document as well is because it's so much fun to be able to go back and watch. Whether it be like, I can go back and watch videos that I took in the locker room after the 67s won the second round series in triple overtime, which was the longest game in franchise history. I have videos now in that locker room of the team celebrating just special moments that you're able to go back and watch. And it's so much easier to create content when you're documenting because you don't have to constantly be thinking about, okay, what should we film? What's the next thing? You're just moving with, as life happens around you, you're documenting it and creating content around it. Another thing I'm a strong believer in is repurposing your content as much as possible. Another thing that people struggle with on social media is how do you create content for every single platform? Because there's so many platforms now, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, there's so many platforms. And so my belief is I try to repurpose as much content as I possibly can. The main way I do that is by having one pillar piece of content. So that's your biggest piece of content. So an example could be my podcast. And so with my podcast, I take that hour-and-a-half conversation, I try and break it up into as many smaller pieces of content as possible. So I can take the hour-and-a-half podcast that I can put as a podcast, but then I can also upload it to YouTube. I can then break apart smaller 5 to 10 minute clips and put them on YouTube as well. I can break the podcast down to 60-second clips, and then I have content for my Instagram. I can then take quotes from the clips from the podcast and I can make quote graphics with them, and that works for LinkedIn, Instagram. I can post those quotes to Twitter. So I try and repurpose content as much as possible. So trying to get as much out of one individual piece of content as you possibly can. So instead of recording one podcast, it takes me probably, with research, preparation, and editing, it probably takes me around 8 hours to do a podcast. So instead of doing 8 hours to achieve one piece of content, I can do an 8-hour process and achieve like 20 pieces of content. So I'm a big believer in repurposing your content as much as possible. Another thing I absolutely believe in, which a lot of people, especially when it comes to podcasting, people always ask me like, what kind of gear do I need? Or if they want to start doing YouTube, like what kind of camera should I buy? But at the end of the day, I'm a 100% believer in that gear does not matter. I do the vlog I talked about that I do on my YouTube. I literally record with my cell phone. You could start your own podcast today with literally your cell phone. You can do photography with your cell phone, YouTube videos, like I said, with your cell phone. You have all the gear you need in your pocket right now with your cell phone. And so gear does not matter when it comes to creating content. If you're waiting to get the perfect camera, the perfect microphone, it's just an excuse as to why you're not starting. Another thing when it comes to content, on the note of gear, another thing is that quality is subjective. What I think is really good content, you might not think is really good content. What you think is really good content, I might not think is really good content. You can't determine something as being quality content because each person will interpret it differently. So that's why I think at the end of the day, where it comes down to with content is just create what you want to create, put as much content out there as you can, and then see what the people resonate with, because you never know. And one thing I've noticed, I've done 112 podcasts, and a lot of my guests, a common theme that they'll bring up is that they're uploading content. There's always that video they'll post on YouTube where they didn't have a video to post that week, so they just kind of cobbled something together and they put it out there. And that video that they weren't happy with, they weren't proud with, blew up. They thought the quality of the video was poor, but their audience thought differently. They thought it was an amazing video and it did super, super well for them. And so quality at the end of the day is subjective. And I know that's hard too because we're our own biggest critics. I know I am. So trying to just not be perfect with our content, put it out there, because at the end of the day, quality is subjective. The next thing too is when it comes to putting out content, you have to pay attention to distribution, obviously. So the example I always give is if you write a blog, screenshotting that blog and posting it on TikTok as a video probably doesn't make sense. So you have to pay attention as to where you're putting your content and making sure the type of content you're posting maps to the platform you're posting it on. Another thing too, that especially when TikTok first started to gain popularity, a lot of people just started saving their Instagram stories and posting them on TikTok, but that isn't the way to distribute an Instagram story. That doesn't work with TikTok. You have to create content that's native to the platform. And in terms of creating personal content, I don't know if any of you are working on your personal brands, or that's something you'd like to do. When making content for yourself personally, I always tell people to make content that maps to your skill set. If you hate being on video, or if you hate, for example, let's say you hate writing. If you hate writing and writing a blog is just the last thing you want to do, then starting a blog probably isn't the best idea. If you hate being on camera and recording videos, then you probably shouldn't be doing YouTube either. Don't force yourself to create content that makes you uncomfortable. Focus on creating content that you enjoy creating. And so if you love talking, if you can talk for hours, then maybe a podcast is a type of content that you should be creating. Create content that one maps to your strengths and maps to your interests. Because if you're trying to create content or even just do a job that you're not happy doing, it's going to be harder for you to push through those difficult moments. Versus if you're doing something you absolutely love doing, you're going to be more inclined to push through once it gets tough. Another thing too, when it comes to personal brands and creating personal content, I am a strong believer that niches on the internet are far deeper than we think. A lot of people think that I have this very specific interest, not a lot of people are going to care. But the internet is a very big, a very broad, very vast place. And no matter how small you think your interests are, there's going to be a community you can cultivate around them. A great place to find a good niche on the internet that I always explain is find your interests and find the intersection point between those interests. So for example, say you really like hockey, but you also really like real estate. Maybe you should start creating content about the homes and the real estate that professional NHL players are purchasing. And you create a whole content around real estate involving NHL players. And I think that might sound like a pretty small niche, but it's probably a lot bigger than you think. But we've got 5 minutes left here, so I just want to open up to any questions or anything. If anyone had any questions for me, whether it be about content, my job, my career, anything like that, advice, whatever you have, I'm open to answering any questions. Yeah, so the connections for the longest time has literally just been me finding people I think are interesting that I want to have on the podcast and just sending them a cold email and a cold message on Instagram. That's pretty much it. I recently got sponsored by a company called TrueFan out of Toronto, and they're really well connected, and so they've been making some nice introductions for me for the podcast as well, so that's helped me land some bigger guests. Like I recently interviewed the co-founder of Starbucks, and that came through my sponsor. But other than that, like it is just straight up cold messaging people on Instagram and cold emailing them. I landed a guest yesterday with a guy named Tyler Babin who used to record videos for an entrepreneur named Gary Vaynerchuk, and I literally just sent him an audio message on Instagram, and I was like, hey man, like this is my name, this is my podcast is about, I'd love to have you on and talk about this and this, like let me know if you want to come on the podcast. And he did, and he said for sure. And so it's honestly just been a lot of shooting my shot. And the thing with shooting your shot and trying to get random people on the podcast is you're going to get ignored a lot more than you're going to say yes. Leading up to Tyler Babin saying you come on my podcast, I think I sent 15 emails prior to that over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I didn't hear a single response. And so you're going to hear a lot of no's. You just got to keep going, and eventually you're going to get that yes. But with the podcast, it's literally just been nothing but cold emailing. And even so, on that note too, like when I first started the podcast, I set a goal once I hit 15 podcasts, I could go to New York City and record interviews and plan a trip around my podcast. And I did that, and I brought my good friend with me, and we just spent months leading up to the trip messaging random people. And we ended up recording 10 podcasts in 6 days with total strangers in New York City in person. They invited us, some of them invited us into their home, some of them into the office they worked at, their store. So it's honestly just been shooting my shot, hoping people say yes, and just not getting discouraged when I get a no or no answer. Yeah, so my opinion with how much time it takes, at the end of the day, it's how much time you want to put into it. I think the more time you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. But I think like I don't want to sit here and give a number like you have to put 5 hours a week into putting out content, especially if it's personal content around your own personal brand, because I don't want to scare anybody away from putting out content. I would say create within the means that you have and the time that you have. If you only have an hour a week to devote to social media content, you can still do a fair amount with that. You can still take a couple photos for your Instagram. You can still write some tweets, some LinkedIn posts. So I think at the end of the day, the amount of time it really takes is the amount of time that you have and the amount of time that you're willing to put into it. Yeah, I think so. I think podcasts will continue to grow. We're seeing a lot of money being pumped into podcasting as well right now. Like obviously the biggest example is Spotify acquiring Joe Rogan's podcast for over $100 million. But yeah, I think podcasting will continue to grow, and I think like everyone listening to this could start their own podcast. And kind of building on Kira's advice too, like the podcast that I have has just allowed me to speak to so many people that I never would have gotten the chance to speak to had I not started a podcast. So it's like kind of building on top of the coffee chat and giving people an incentive to talk to you. Like I've spoken to the co-founder of Starbucks, and he never would have taken the time to talk to me had I not had a podcast. So by doing that, it allows me to talk to people I don't actually get the chance to talk to otherwise. And then also being a student, you can leverage the fact that you are a student, and that will help you get your foot in the door even more, because people are more inclined to help students. So I didn't start my podcast until after I graduated. But had I started it before, I would have been leveraging the hell out of the fact that I was a student, because that makes people more inclined to talk to you as well. 5 seconds left. So I just want to thank all of you for sticking through this masterclass and hanging out with me for the last 20-25 minutes. I appreciate it.
I-1000, I-100. Whoa, it is way dark. Let me see if I can find the light up here. Oh, there we go. I 100% dropped the ball on today's vlog. I just didn't do anything after the gym this morning. Hopefully I was able to find enough clips from the talk I gave today to kind of cobble together a vlog that was at least 2-3 minutes long. But I'm just out for a walk right now, and honestly I've been trying to go for these walks at least once a day. They've been happening to happen after dinner lately. I just do them. Anything good to get out of the house. I was spending a lot of time cooped up in the apartment and not leaving. Like there was literally like days I would go without leaving the apartment. So I'm trying to prioritize leaving the house. I honestly never have a plan with where I am. I'm literally like the war museum's right there. That was not my plan when I left today. I never have a plan with these walks, but no, it's good. I'm just listening to a podcast with Tyler Babin to prep for the podcast I have with him coming up in the next little while here. No crazy message with today's vlog. I appreciate you checking it out. Make sure to get out of your house, go for some walks, enjoy the fresh air, especially while we still have it. It is November and I'm here in a t-shirt. But yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna finish up this walk here. Like I said, I appreciate you checking this out. I'll be back with a more coherent vlog next time. We'll talk soon.